Hello, fellow internet degenerates. My name is Nate, and I wanted to talk about cars a little bit today. More specifically, how to get into cars as a hobby, and also just how to learn how to work on them. Now, I don't want to hear anything about this headset I'm using as a mic. I don't have anything better, and it was a gift from my Pookie Bear, who's actually the inspiration for this video. Now, I've been working on cars for, at this point, most of my life, and I've always liked them a lot. One of the classic things that pretty much every kid that gets into cars has is some sort of Hot Wheel that was their favorite when they were younger. And for me, it was the Hot Wheels 4th Gen Camaro that I used to see in NASCAR. And this isn't actually my childhood car. I lost it at some point. I found this one at a thrift store when I was in college. When I was younger, and by younger I mean like a small child, every time we'd visit my nanny and pappy, which is what we called my mom's parents, my dad's parents were grandma and grandpa, my nanny would have a little Matchbox car that she would get me. So I've always liked cars. I thought they were cool. I always wanted to get into them, and specifically, I like Camaros. Um, my childhood best friend and I, we would watch Top Gear together back when that was still running. We really, I mean, everybody liked them, but we really liked the challenges and the specials. You know, the build your own camper van where Clarkson has air suspension on this like 2-story sedan wagon conversion he did. And we would also look at car magazines and play things like Midnight Club and all that good stuff. As a Gen Z person, the hobby is very hard to get into. And you could argue it always was. But specifically, coming of age at a time where rents are pretty ridiculous, the cost of living is pretty unaffordable, and most people aren't getting paid enough to really do anything other than just get by. Getting into cars is kind of a stupid decision. A lot of these cars that everybody wants, well, everybody wants them, so they're a lot more expensive. And it's even getting to the point where some of the lesser known cars are ticking up in price, and to get a good example of one that isn't going to be just an absolute mechanical nightmare under the hood, it's going to set you back probably 7 to 10 grand unless you get lucky. Behind me is my 1997 Camaro RS convertible. It is a car that used to be my grandpa's, and I used to work on it a lot with him when he was still around. Now, I have inherited it, which is the only reason I can afford it, and I know that's not the case for a lot of people. It's a very fortunate, quote unquote, position to be in that I have a car that I've always sort of liked and found intriguing and aesthetically pleasing, that really all I had to pay for it was the administrative and bureaucratic fees of getting the title transferred, registration, all that jazz. It was a car that, like I said, I worked on with my grandpa a lot, and he was a gearhead, so he made sure, more or less, there's some issues with it, more or less, it was fully functioning when I got to it. Similarly, my first car, which is just off screen, was a 2009 Toyota Corolla. And I purchased that from my pappy after my nanny passed. In a lot of ways, I'm very lucky in my journey with cars, especially since I don't come from a family that is rich, I guess, is a general way of putting it and very subjective, but we're in the middle class. The reason I clarify what my first car was, is that I believe it was an 8th or ninth gen. Yeah, ninth gen Corollas, which is what I had, the '09 to 2013 generation. They were some of the most manufactured cars, I think, ever. That could be very wrong, but there's a lot of them, is the point being. Even almost 20 years later, they're a very common sight on the roads. But they're also easy to work on and they're cheap to maintain if you are handy. Recently, I went through my second or third muffler. It's a known weak spot in the design where the flange that connects the muffler to the rest of the exhaust system is really good at collecting water, and so eventually the pipe just rusts off of the flange and you need a new muffler. I got mine on Rock Auto 4 or 5 months ago now for $34. My parents are I'm very lucky to have the parents that I do because they understand how difficult it is to establish a foundation as a young adult now, and how easily, a couple $100 unexpected expense can just destroy months or years of progress. The last time I was visiting them around Christmas time, they had noticed that my muffler was out, and I had told them, yeah, I need to get a new muffler, blah, blah, blah. And they offered, hey, well, if you need it, we'll help you out. We'll spot you for it. You can pay us back later. And I took it down to the shop just because I kind of didn't feel like it was December. I didn't want to get under the car, and I'm in a Great Lakes region, so we have a lot of salt up here in the wintertime, and it's bitterly cold. So the idea of crawling around in the salty snow with my fingers freezing off trying to replace a muffler wasn't that appealing. The quote came back for a muffler replacement, $586. Now, I don't know how good everybody watching this video is with math, but that's a lot more than $34 for the part. It is labor. They have to turn a profit to keep the lights on, and I get that. When I got the muffler to replace, I had already been working on cars at this point for over a decade. I'm 26 now. I've had this car since I was 15, so 11 years. And I can confidently say if I had to replace the muffler the first time it went out, I wouldn't have been able to do it. And I did take it to a shop. The point still stands that for someone like me when I was younger that was more intimidated by cars than I am now, I was more willing to pay the $300-400 for someone else to do it just so I know I didn't mess it up and to make sure it could pass inspection and whatnot. And now it took me a while because the bolts were really seized and rusted. It took me a day or so just factoring in letting penetrating oil do its thing. But it took me $35. I had to buy, I think, they're sitting behind me. I'm not going to grab them. I had to get a set of deep well sockets to get my wrench on one of the bolts because the stem was so long, or nut. Took me 2-3 hours doing it myself and $34, and then another $10-15 for the socket set. That's a hell of a difference in price, and it makes it suddenly a lot more affordable to not only have a project car, but to be a car owner in general. Because I had learned to work on cars from a younger age, my grandpa and I, like I said, would work on this car, and he was actually a big-time gearhead. The first date he took my grandma on when they were my age was him and his buddies, and this is a sign of how much times have changed. Him and his buddies would hot rod cars and go race them on the local airstrip. The cops wouldn't stop them, but they wouldn't encourage it either. They knew when the races were happening, and they'd be kind of on standby in case anything went wrong, and when it got too late to kick everybody out. When I was helping them clean out their house a long time ago, I found a Jaguar hood ornament and he told me about this old Jaguar he had that he hot rodded, and it was one of his big regrets is that it was the first project car he got, and he ended up selling it when my dad was born because he's like, I don't really need this. I'm a family guy now. Even at my lowest, I'm a family guy. He taught my dad and my uncle how to work on their cars, and that translated into my dad showing me how to work on cars, and eventually my grandpa and I forming a connection. Excuse me. Going back to sort of learning how to work on your car and make it affordable. And like I said, my friend who inspired this video, he has recently had to sell his old car because the catalytic converter went out. He had a Accord, I believe. He had some sort of Honda. It was like an $800 part, let alone, because I looked it up for him. It was like an $800 part, and then he had to factor in labor. And so for him, it just made sense to sell the car and buy an old Matrix from his cousin who was getting a new car. And I really encouraged that decision because the Matrix has, I believe, the same engine as the 09 Corolla. So being close friends that we are, I was like, well, I can help you, work through it and learn how to get your hands dirty a little bit and save you a lot of money. And he is, I think, a good example of most people nowadays where it's not that he's incompetent. He's actually incredibly good at what he does. He works as a controlled burn manager down south, which is a job I was actually looking to get into. A lot of these jobs are seasonal, and even if they're permanent, the funding can fall through pretty much at any time. And there's a lot of instability that comes with that. And so I was very happy to offer him sort of my mid-level knowledge of working on cars, and especially since the new car he was getting is a cousin of the car I learned how to work on. Yesterday he texted me and said, hey, excuse me. Yesterday he texted me and said, hey, I'm at Walmart right now and I can't figure out what oil filter I need because he had recently gotten new brake pads and rotors, and some of his friends at the place he works at have a shop for the fleet vehicles that they'll also use to work on their personal cars. And so I really encouraged him, hey, now that you have access to a shop, you don't have to worry about the overhead of buying your own tools. You should, cut your teeth, learn how to do some of these basic things on a car. So I sent him a link. It wasn't Rock Auto, it was one of the other auto parts sites. And he was able to get brake pads and rotors for 100, 150 bucks, something like that. And then his buddies helped him put it on at the shop. So he saved himself however much that job costs. He was like, well, I'm pretty sure I still need like something done with the tires and stuff, which, having your tires rotated and balanced and getting in alignment, that's something everybody should do. Don't neglect that. That is one of the easiest ways to fix the way your car feels, especially if it feels like your car shudders as you're going faster. A lot of the time the alignment's out, and so the wheel's just vibrating. The faster you go, it gets worse and worse, and then that, inertia shakes the rest of the car and makes it feel bad. So after saving however much money he did buying the parts himself and doing the job himself with some help, he was able to pay a shop to give him an alignment and balance and rotate his tires and wheels, and still had money left over from what he was originally quoted for the brake and rotor job. So now he's texting me about he knows he needs an oil change and he has enough confidence, hey, I can do the oil myself. But he couldn't find the manual in the shop that you have at like AutoZone where you look up the car year, make and model and figure out what oil filter you need. So he texted me. He didn't know something a lot of people know, that usually car shops or parts shops will bundle, you buy this oil, you get a free filter. And yeah, say what you will about a lot of times it's like Fram or a not super high quality filter, but not everybody can buy premium parts. And sometimes you just got to do what's within your budget, which is to circle back to when I first learned how to work on cars. It was stuff like oil changes. It was stuff like, learning how to clean the wheels. My dad showed me how to do brakes and rotor changes, and that led into me being comfortable enough to, when the serpentine belt needed replaced, that was a $10 part, and all I had to get comfortable with was figuring out where the belt tensioner was, putting a breaker bar on it, and loosening it so the belt fall off. And then you look at the schematic, route the serpentine belt, and then boom, it's on. It's a 10-15 minute job unless you really royally mess it up. Because a lot of it's plug and play. You buy the fog lights, you put them on, you wire them up. That's that. I bought some headlights because my old ones were getting kind of fogged up. And I thought, well, instead of doing the method where you wet sand them and try and restore them a little bit, the Corollas have this silver headlight unit, and there was a new replica unit that had black, and I thought that looked nice, so I bought those. It was like $80. I had found a guy that was selling the Corolla S from the 2013 model, because the 2009 to 2011 Sports had, I believe, 16 or 8 spoke alloy wheels, and I thought they were interesting. They're certainly better than the steel wheels I was rocking with scratched shit hubcaps, because there were the 5-spoke alloys someone was selling on Marketplace for $250 with lock nuts, and I just bought them. These are going to look so sick. They're going to look so cool. And that was something where, because I had done the brake job with him previously in the rotors, it wasn't crazy to me to take the wheels. I knew how to break lugs and take the wheels off and put them back on and torque them down to specs so that I wasn't worried the wheels were going to fly off because I forgot to tighten the lugs all the way. I got a set of tail lights that are kind of the eBay special. I think they look cool, but by most car standards, they're a little tacky. And I wired them in myself. I was able to put a spoiler on that came with a third brake light that I was able to wire in. I learned how to look up what the tow rating and things like that were. Excuse me. There were a lot of times where, when I moved, I would just rent a U-Haul trailer, and it made moving so easy. And it's just a Corolla, Towing capacity is, I think, 1,500 pounds or 2,500 pounds. It's one of the two. I can't remember. But that's more than enough. You can kind of see how just learning those little easy jobs instilled a lot of confidence in me, and it allowed me to get into cars in a way I always wanted to. Like I said, the inspiration for this video was my buddy doubting himself in the same way I did when I was a lot younger, and being just so completely intimidated by cars. It's like day by day he's growing on it. Not that he's like into cars or anything. He's more of, cars are a utility, they are a tool, but he is very much enjoying the process of learning a new competency, a new skill that he kind of convinced himself he wasn't able to do. And that leads me into what I want to spend a lot of time on, which is more just the how to have a project car, how to have a car that you're into and learning to work on, and not having to take to the shop constantly to the point that you can't afford it, as someone coming of age in a time where being good with money and knowing how to budget and having a good rainy day fund is arguably more essential than it's been in a long time. And I know this is a exceptional case, and a lot of people are not in this boat. But the Camaro that I'm sitting next to is not only something that has intense sentimental value to me, because, like I said, I used to work on it with my grandpa a lot, and anytime we'd go places, like we used to go to a dirt racetrack where they had sprint cars and stock cars and stuff. One of their friends actually raced stock cars. So we would go, me, my grandma, and my grandpa would go to the races and watch him race. And a lot of times we'd go in this car right here. So there's a lot of sentimental value in it for me, which drive me to learn more than I maybe would have otherwise, just to keep it on the road, because it does feel like I'm keeping a part of my grandpa with me. And it brings me a lot of joy, having, even though obviously the paint is not perfect and there's a lot of other issues with the car, it's mechanically sound enough that I can drive it. It's nice to have a convertible sports car in your early to mid 20s just as a thing to have. The biggest issue I faced with this car, and this is the case with many of these 4th gens and a lot of the 3rd gens, fuel pump. I bet everybody saw that coming from a mile away. A year and some change after my grandpa passed, I was finally ready to start investing in this car. Because I didn't want to, at this point, it was still part of the estate. And if anything happened to my grandma, that's dubious legality of just taking a car that's not in your name and saying, hey, well, they wanted me to have it. I didn't know if that was going to hold up in court. So now that I had the car in my name, I paid the $80 title transfer fee or whatever, I was ready to start putting some actual money into it to be able to drive it and have it as my car. Now, I've always liked these cars, but my dad and my uncle could care less. My dad also is a Mustang guy. It's one of those things I think most people don't understand when they get into cars, is most people do not care at all. Even other car guys, a lot of the times they don't care that much. So you're really on your own when you have a vision for what you want the car to be. Yeah, it's cool to tell people about that, but ultimately no one really cares, and you got to do it. And then people might care a little bit. These cars aren't worth a lot of money, and in the shape it's in, maybe 3 or 4 grand. And that's after I've been working on it. The convertible top was completely shot. I thought it had a black top. As you can see, it's a tan top. The labor was, I got it quoted at $1,100 by 2 different shops. It's a super involved process. It's not a fun job. I wouldn't do it again. I had to get a car cover. There was a guy who had a video on how to replace the top. He only spoke Spanish, and it was the only video guide that I had found on the internet of how to do this. I'd saw some posts, like on the LS1 Tech forums, of how to do it, but they were like text walkthroughs, and I couldn't make heads or tail of that, and I wasn't about to rip the only thing keeping most of the rain out off until I had a good example of how to do it. I had to go all in. I had to learn. I had no other option because I couldn't afford to take it to a shop and get it done for me. And I think that's the gist of how to get into cars and how to have a cool car when you don't have a lot of money. Rich people can afford to be incompetent and have nice things because they can just buy them outright. Most of us are not rich people. We have to learn how to take not nice things and make them nice if we want to have nice things. For me, that involved spending 2 or 3 weekends in a row doing the convertible top myself, finding out how to clean the wheels and find tire sizes and things like that. The wheels were about the same color as this sticker. They came with silver wheels, and that was as simple as finding a brake dust dissolver that you spray onto the wheels and you clean it with a brush and then wash it off, and boom. All that gold color was just brake dust, years and years of brake dust. The spoiler that's on it right now, I pulled from a junkyard and painted myself. I think it looks nice to have a contrasting color, and I do have the wing pieces that I also painted. When I got this spoiler on, I thought it looked nice just kind of as is without the secondary pieces, but there's also a dent right here that I need to pull. Until that dent is pulled, this part of the spoiler won't fit on. The burger panel, I had seen the GMMG Mr. Chevrolet supercar catfishes. They were the 400 horsepower catfishes that came with the wide body kit, and a lot of them had this black burger panel that I thought was a really nice contrast. This was, I think, $50 from a junkyard off of a black one, so I didn't have to paint it myself. And then this was like a $8 vinyl decal off Etsy. Little things like that. Baby steps lead you to suddenly you look and, wow, I was really scared of messing up the oil change at 15 when I had my first car, the Corolla. Suddenly, I'm really balls deep replacing the convertible top myself because A, there's no other option. If it's going to get done, I got to do it. And B, I was comfortable doing it. I had taken small jobs on and progressively gotten more and more comfortable with the car. The serpentine belt's been replaced. The oil filter is fine. One of the big issues with these cars is that the jack point is not actually a jack point. And I say that meaning you would think there's a panel right behind the front two wheels that looks like a jack point, but it's not reinforced. It's just plastic bodywork. And a lot of these cars, they bow out on that panel because people jack them up there and it can't support the weight. That's exactly the whole thing I wanted to talk about, is just it's not as intimidating as it seems. And you're a lot more capable than you think you are. It just takes a little bit of willingness to get your hands dirty and maybe mess it up a little bit, especially if you have any sort of access to the internet. You almost have no excuse, and it's going to save you so much money. A lot of the shops near me charge about $100 for an oil change. You go to AutoZone or Advance or whatever, get 5 quarts of oil and a filter bundled for $40. It's a 17 millimeter bolt on the oil pan and like a $5 oil wrench to get the filter off, and that's all you need. So $60 every 5,000 miles. Cars at 120,000 miles now. Do the math. That's a significant amount of money I've saved just from doing the oil myself, not to mention all the other jobs. And you get to a point where those smaller jobs like that, I can change oil in like 10, 15 minutes. I think most people who have been working on their cars for a while can do it in a similarly short amount of time. So then you also factor in that now you're saving all of that time of calling a shop, scheduling an appointment, taking time out of your day to drive over there, taking time out of your day to wait for the oil change to happen, and then driving back home. Or if you want to waste even more time, dropping your car off, having someone pick you up, and then having to drive back. So you're driving to and from the dealership or, muffler shop, lube shop, whatever. You're doing that twice you could just do it in your driveway. The big issue I think a lot of people run into is like build creep or wanting to do too much at once and getting discouraged. With this car, it was nowhere near what it is now for most of the time I've owned it. And it's still not where I want it to be. But I thoroughly enjoy owning it. It brings me a lot of happiness, and it's also an outlet for, if you're ever stressed in life, go tinker around in the garage or just, hang out and look at your car and be like, oh, I've made some progress on that. I'd like to do that. It's something to distract from life a lot of the time. And as you can tell, I do spend a lot of time in the garage. A lot of people kind of get in their own ways when it comes to enjoying their projects because they let their ultimate vision for the car cloud their present enjoyment of what it is. When I first got this car back on the road, it was nothing really special, and it still isn't. It's special to me, but it's not special. Choosing a car that you're passionate about, I think, is a mistake people make where they chase hero cars or cars they think will impress people, which is why I brought up buying a project that makes you happy and realizing most people don't care about your car at all, it's very easy to be completely underwater on a car that you're buying for clout and it doesn't even run. So not only are you not enjoying the car, you're not even really building it for yourself. You're building it for other people's approval. Something I encounter a lot when I'm talking to people in my local car communities, where it's not necessarily about cars they're passionate about. It's about cars they think will impress people at the shows, or they'll be able to start an Instagram account, centered around the car they're building. And certainly that works out for some people, right? You have your Doug DeMuro types that are able to build a career off of talking about cars. But again, one of those X factors is he's talking about cars he's passionate about. And yes, he does videos that are talking about cars he knows will get clicks and views. But a lot of people tune in to hear him talk about things he thinks are interesting and to hear his perspective on it. And it should be the same with your car. You should want to work on your car because you think it's interesting for whatever reason. This car has the Buick 3800-2 engine in it, a famously bulletproof engine that there's a lot of theories online. GM killed it because it was simply too good of an engine. It didn't break down, parts were cheap, it was easy to maintain and work on yourself. And there's a lot of examples of these engines going 400,000 miles without much issue. There was a guy that had the same car in a T-top. It was a 96. Or no, it was a 97 because the 96s had the 3.4 liter V6. He had 97 with T-tops in the Polo green color. And he was at 350,000 miles. And he's like, I've owned this car since new. I've had a lot of fun with it. I haven't always necessarily babied it. As long as you keep up with the maintenance, they'll be fine. And that's something I think is cool. I like working on things and fixing old things and maintaining stuff. This laptop is a 2015 MacBook Air. I got it from my friend. It was his old school laptop that they let him keep. I'm still running Mac Mojave on it because that's my favorite OS. At this point, I think it's been discontinued for 8 years by Apple. So you can't even find the download on Apple's site. You have to get it from a third party. And the battery went out, so I had to learn how to replace that. I stuck a new SSD in it. It's got a terabyte of storage up from 20 gig or 120 gig. And I had to reflash the OS and all that jazz. Point being, if I just hadn't been working on cars, I would have thought, well, this laptop is dying. It doesn't really do what I want it to do anymore, XYZ. I'll just have to bite the bullet and buy like a new laptop from Apple or find a newer used laptop. But no, I was like, if I can fix a car, I can fix a laptop. That's a little off topic. This is a car that is special to me, but it's still kind of not really popular. Most people, if they're going to get an old Camaro, they're going to go for like a third gen or a second gen. It's at a low point where I've seen some traction for these cars starting to pick back up because people are realizing, especially people my age, they're a great bang for your buck. And, they stopped making them again, twice. They have canceled the Camaro. That's cool. But buy a car you like. Do some research. Don't buy a car for clout to impress people. You should get into cars because you like them as machines. You're interested in how they work and learning how to work on them, and the design language of whatever car you're buying speaks to you. One of my good friends who is a car guy, different friend from the guy I'm kind of showing the ropes to, he has a Mazda 3 hatch that we were talking the other day, and he told me he'd like to buy an old Cosmo, switch the Cosmo engine into his Mazda 3, which was his first car, and make it kind of like a rallycross race car. And then he'll take the Cosmo shell and make that like a really nice, reliable daily that also is cool. And I think that's a great example of what I'm talking about. Most people would look at the Mazda 3 hatch and be like, yeah, that's like whatever. But my friend loves that car. It's his first car. It's the car he learned how to work on cars with, and it is something that he's interested in. He likes Mazdas and he likes rotary engines. And yeah, it's not the flashiest and it's not going to be super valuable and maybe not the fastest, but he loves the car and he's got a vision for what he wants to do with it. And the Cosmo, I don't know how much of a sleeper hit it is, but you know, most people, if you're going to buy a 90s Japanese car, you're going to go for like an R34, maybe an R32, Mark IV Supra, or a 240SX. That's what I love about my car and what I would really encourage people my age looking to get their first project to do is find kind of a niche car that most people don't really care about, but you find interesting, and especially bonus points if it's easy to work on. Like I said, this is a Buick 3800 in it. It's got an engine in it that I don't necessarily have to worry about destroying itself for no reason. Unless I do something seriously wrong and neglect it, it's probably going to be fine. It gives me leeway and breathing room to mess up and take a while to really learn everything about the car. I can focus on buying a spoiler and painting it and getting little body panels. I also forgot to mention these are the 93 to 96 taillights. The clear piece on the stock taillights fell off one day and it was trash night, so the trash man picked it up. It was a good opportunity for me to get these taillights because I think they look better anyway. I replaced the old busted cassette deck. Another thing, that's what I'm talking about with cars that are cheap to maintain or kind of niche, or you know, so you learn little things about the cars that you're looking to buy because parts availability is an important factor. In the 90s, GM recycled a lot of parts and a lot of different models shared parts between them. So the CD head unit is super cheap because pretty much every GM car from the time period that this Camaro is from had that same head unit and all the wiring was the same. It's just a common part, so it was like $50 out of a junkyard. Be into your car. Find a car that fits your budget with parts availability that fits your budget. Know what you want to do with the car. I am going for more of an OEM plus. I would like to keep it relatively period correct OEM plus, but maybe that's not what you want. Maybe if you had this car, you'd want to put on one of those big body kits and a wing and all that jazz. Good. If you're about that good, just plan for the expenses of it. And it's very affordable if you know where you're trying to take the project. Don't buy the whole body kit for $800 that comes unpainted as the first thing you do with the car, because then you're going to blow all of your budget, or God forbid go into debt. You have nothing to show for it. You've got an unpainted body kit that's not on your car that you're going to have to pay to get painted, or you're going to have to pay for the gear to paint it yourself. And maybe there's some mechanical issues, so you can't drive the car anyway, even after you get the body kit on. It's going to be a way more enjoyable experience having a project car when it's not constantly draining your wallet and you're able to actually drive it around. The other project I have, we get a lot of snow, especially being this close to the lake. We get lake effect snow. Out of nowhere, it'll be whiteout conditions. Having a rear-wheel drive convertible and a front-wheel drive sedan doesn't necessarily make you the most comfortable when you're in whiteout conditions. So I started looking into cars with all-wheel drive as a way to not worry so much. All-wheel drive with snow tires and defensive driving, they kind of pair a lot better than front-wheel drive, in my opinion. It makes me more comfortable stopping or driving in general or avoiding people, because a lot of times, I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but a lot of times people just flat out do not know how to drive in the snow, so having a car that's a little bit more agile in the snow is nice, which is what led me to this BMW. my dad had always maintained our family's cars as a way to afford nicer cars. My mom had a 5 Series, and the only reason we could afford that car was that anytime anything went wrong, my dad would fix it, and a lot of the times he would rope me into the fix as well. So there was a Vanos unit repair that we did. There was an O-ring that dried out and cracked in the cooling system at the very bottom of the engine. So me and my dad spent like an entire weekend ripping the entire engine apart. And I vividly remember, I was like, why did we do all of this? And he went, for this. He took the O-ring, he leaned down into the engine bay and put it in. And he went, all right, now we start putting it back together. And I was like, we had to do all of this just for that? And he's like, yep. And that's like a multi-$1,000 job to get done. But he had to learn and taught me because, well, it's either that or get rid of the car and buy something cheaper. A week after starting my look for a new car, I'm on Facebook like first thing in the morning. Guy lists a 330xi in my favorite color about an hour away for a reasonable price. I pretty much knew I was buying the car, warts and all, but I would encourage everybody to look into the car itself before you buy it. What I did was I knew it had the same engine as my mom's old BMW, so I knew I was pretty comfortable working on this engine. I had done a lot of projects before, so at the very least I could, take a trip to my parents, ask my dad about it, borrow some tools that maybe are specialty tools that you would need, and I'd be able to handle that myself. If you're not in that boat, I would advise against them. Get something easier to work on, just because a lot of times they need special tools, whereas like something with a Toyota, they're designed with, at least older cars. 2010 and earlier, the cars were designed with the idea that a lot of users would do DIY maintenance, so pretty much every bolt on that car is a 10 or 14 millimeter. Very easy, don't need special tools. With the BMW, I knew that the cooling system had been refreshed through talking to the guy, except for the water pump. And he had the pump, but he didn't have the tools to work on it himself, and he didn't want to pay for it because he was just planning to sell it anyway. So I knew the water pump was dubious at best, but I had the replacement part, and I figured out that with a breaker bar or a pry bar and a big adjustable, I think it went up to 40 millimeters, I could get the clutch fan off and get to the water pump and do it myself instead of having to pay $800 to $1,000 to take it to a shop should the pump go out. Now, that did happen. That job only took me an hour and a half because I was kind of taking my time with it, but it wasn't a big deal. The water pump absolutely, what happened was the bearing itself failed. So when I pulled the old pump out, a bunch of ball bearings fell out and it was in pieces in my hand. I wasn't intimidated at all by it because I had the part, I had the tools to put it back together. It's work. It's something that I think you need to find some level of enjoyment or satisfaction in if you do want to have a project car. You got to like working on cars to a degree. Otherwise, just wait till you have a lot of money and pay someone else to do all the work and restore the car for you so you can have the nice car. But like I said, most of you aren't rich people that can just do that. Part of the fun I've had with all of my cars is seeing where I started with them and where I am now with them. Every time I do something on the car, I document it and I put it into my folder. So it's like I can see a timeline effectively as I scroll through my pictures of where I started and every little thing that led me to where I am now. Like with this, like I said, there's a dent here. The gas cap got pulled off. I found one in the junkyard. It's polo green. This is bright metallic green, so it doesn't necessarily color match, but I learned how to clean it up, riveted it in myself, and now it looks a lot better than it did. And I really encourage, if you think you are into cars or would like being into cars, find a car that you find interesting with good parts availability that's easy to work on and start there. You don't have to buy your end game dream car as your first project. In fact, don't do that. Get a car that you think is cool, that you can make mistakes on, that is forgiving, that can teach, so you can build the skills you don't have yet. Or maybe you do have, but they're not at the level you would want them to be. So by the time you're at a point in your life where you can get the dream car. You have the skills to do everything correctly because you cut your teeth on something else. I bought the BMW again as some snow insurance and as a replacement daily. The BMW is really the first car I have picked out for myself that is something I specifically wanted. Because I never finished the story, but like I said, I knew I was buying the car, warts and all, talked to the guy, and I was able to get a good price for it. It was not in perfect condition, but I knew I had the know-how to at least keep it running until I got to a point where I could fund bigger repairs. And it's also the only 330xi within like 250 miles of where I'm at. And I don't need an M3 and I don't need a CI because this is my sports car. This is my coupe. I do need a little bit of extra room. I like the sedan. I like that I can fit my entire drum set in the Corolla. So I was looking for a BMW that was like that. I settled on the E46 because I think that's really one of their last great best designs. And they're pretty reliable, despite what a lot of people will tell you. A lot of it is preventative maintenance previous owners don't do, that you have to do all at once. I like those cars. I've always liked those cars, and I've never really had the opportunity or the financial position to buy one for myself. And also, I never touched on this, but I am in a garage right now. There's a lot of people that don't have a garage to work on their cars. That's another thing to consider is, do you have a place to work on your car? Because when I first started working on the Camaro, I was doing it in my grandparents' driveway, and eventually, when the fuel pump did die, I was doing it on the street. The BMW would not be a thing that I own if I hadn't had the journey on project cars like I had. Start small, build into it, and get yourself where you want to be in the long run, unless you have a shit ton of money. And then in that case, why are you watching this? Why are you listening to me rant? Just go buy the car you want. That's, I guess, where I'll end it is... Oh, wait, the fuel pump real quick. Yeah, so big flaw with these. The fuel pump is on top of the gas tank, which is on top of the rear axle, which is on top of the exhaust system. So if you want to do it right, you probably need a floor lift, a bunch of tools, a bunch of free time, and to disassemble the entire rear end of the car so you can drop the gas tank and do it right. I did what most people with these cars do. I got an angle grinder, cut a hole, and then pulled out the old fuel pump, put the new one in, get under the car, replace the fuel filter. It was like $120 for a AC Delco replacement pump and $10 for a Wix fuel filter versus however much the job is to get the fuel pump replaced. Exactly that is the whole point of this video. You can get into pretty much any car you want so long as you are willing to learn it and do it yourself and have a good prioritization of what needs done. Like I was saying earlier, don't buy the body kit immediately. Mechanical security of the car always comes first, then quality of life stuff, I would say, and then you get into the cool things you want to do on the car. You know, your body kits, if you want to stand your car, you want to buy new wheels, stuff like that. Also, keep in mind that a lot of people will say, you need to buy a good example at this price because it's not worth it otherwise, and blah, 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 blah. My BMW, the 330xi, it was the only one within any reasonable distance for sale. You know, there was a lot of 328i's, there was a lot of convertibles, there was a lot of CI's, and there was a couple M's. Those weren't the cars I was looking for because they weren't serving the purpose I wanted the car for. And there are, you know, sometimes the best tool in your toolbox is a checkbook. There are some jobs, even at my skill level, I'm not equipped to handle. So if they go wrong, I do have to take it to a mechanic. And that's not a bad thing. That's why you have a rainy day fund. That's why you don't blow all your money on the body kit. There is value in saving a car that other people would write off because of things that can be addressed. Obviously, the cheapest part of buying a used BMW is buying the car. That $2,000 BMW is the best $10,000 I ever spent kind of deal. You shouldn't get caught up on needing a pristine garage princess example. And there's a line to be drawn, you know, if an insane biohazard level of mold on the interior of a car you're looking at, avoid that. If it's just needs repainted, maybe there's some rust spots, some dents that need pulled, the headliner's falling off, stuff like that, I would say don't let that necessarily discourage you, because if you're finding a relatively niche car that you find interesting, odds are it's going to be one of a very few that are for sale that you can reasonably get. Just believe in yourself. Don't be afraid of it. Be smart about it. Take pleasure in the journey and that you're working on a car you find interesting. It's a lot more affordable than you think. I think I'm only $1,000 or $2,000 into this car. I haven't even spent $400 or $500 on the BMW. At the end of the day, you're by choosing a project, you're not only getting a car that you think is cool, you're not only developing the skills of maintenance that will save you money, but also that make you a more competent person. You're avoiding a car payment. So many people my age, and especially the millennials, as far as I'm aware, have these massive car payments. I think the average car payment in America right now is $600 a month. And most of these cars aren't a 2024 Mustang GT. You're paying $600 a month for like a Ford Escort or a Chevy Blazer. Or not Blazer, what's in Trax? You're paying way, way too much for just a daily driver, kind of relatively boring car. And there's nothing wrong with that if that works out financially for you, or if you aren't a car person. But I assume if you're watching this, you are. The amount of money I could spend on a 2024 Camaro to get like foot in the door, base model, I think is 54 grand, and that's MSRP. It's more now because they stopped making them. For 54 grand, completely restore this car, completely restore the BMW, completely restore the Corolla, and probably still have money left over. And that's not factoring in if there's any interest on the loan you're going to take out. If I want to have a cool sports car like this, it's either do it myself or go into insane amounts of debt, which also you're not going to get. No bank in their right mind is going to give you an auto loan that isn't going to completely offset the benefit of having the car now in compared to what you're going to end up paying after all is said and done with the interest they're charging you. Cars are cool. Don't be afraid of them. Believe in yourself. Learn something new.